All right, well, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the spring edition of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering Faculty Research Reception. My name is Doug Pelletier and I will be moderating tonight's presentation, which is Research for an Electrified Transportation Future by Dr. Ria Kontou. Dr. Kontou is an assistant professor of civil and environmental engineering, and her research focuses on sustainable and electrified transportation systems planning and management. Just a little housekeeping here. Please hold your questions till the end of the presentation. Please put your brief questions in a chat. So we'll go through order and in the chat. And then attendees tonight will also receive a certificate for a PDH hour, I'd say in about a week or so from the department. With that said, I will hand it over to Dr. Kontou.
Thank you, Doug, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you about my group's research towards achieving an electrified transportation future. We know that our own and the next generation of engineers will build, manage, and maintain these electrified transportation systems, targeting the improvement of quality of life for all. Hopefully at the end of this presentation, I will hear your own ideas and experience on how we can effectively tackle the grand challenge of transport decarbonization. My research at the Transportation Energy Nexus centers sustainable transportation systems planning and management. When it comes to my background, I'm originally from Greece and I received my master's degree from Virginia Tech. After that, I moved to the University of Florida to pursue my PhD. Both of my degrees are in civil engineering as well as my undergraduate degree. At that time, during my time in Florida, I got the opportunity to collaborate with Oak Ridge National Lab and get introduced into Department of Energy research initiatives. This spurred my interest on the sustainable transportation systems, and I pursued a postdoc at the National Renewable Energy Lab, where I stayed for 2 years, and I worked on emerging mobility concepts that result in energy efficiency. I also discovered there my passion for working with young scholars and interns, and I slowly got my way back to academia, pursuing a research position at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the Department of City and Regional Planning. And this was before I started my faculty position here at the University of Illinois at 2019. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture of my current research group of PhD students at the graduation ceremony of one of my master's students. My group is working towards addressing the question, how can we lead the way to a more sustainable transportation future? For us, the notion of sustainability includes conservation of natural resources, minimization of environmental externalities, and other externalities that are associated with the transportation system planning and operation, as well as making sure that during the transition to decarbonized transport systems, we ensure equitable allocation of the benefits across different socioeconomic and demographic groups. To meet these goals, we explore the impact of emerging transportation technologies and services, such as electrification of mobility, shared mobility, and connectivity and automation. And we use rigorous systems modeling techniques, including operations research, optimization, and heuristics for building our algorithms for prescriptive modeling, as well as econometrics and decision-making science, modeling the demand side of the transportation system. Simulations are always important in our complex systems where we have to meet supply and demand considerations. These are very well aligned with the fact that these objectives are well aligned with the fact that transportation is one of the primary energy consumers in the US, second only to the electricity sector. We know that there are a lot of opportunities with the introduction of electric vehicles coupled with shared mobility, connectivity, and automation to reduce energy use and diversify the primary energy source of light-duty transport. In our group, we developed quantitative models, algorithms, and data-driven solutions to emerging mobility challenges, working towards enabling sustainable transportation systems. I would focus on 2 research thrusts. that we primarily focus on right now: electric vehicles, infrastructure planning and management, and data analytics for sustainable transportation. For the former thrust, our recent publications focus on modeling over a planning horizon the optimal electric vehicle incentives and investment allocation so that we can help public agencies meet emissions reduction goals with the introduction of electric vehicles adoption and the use of these incentives and interventions to spur market growth. And then, of course, thinking about charging infrastructure deployment, not only in habitual settings, but also during emergencies, we design evacuation routes that are responsive to electric vehicle drivers' needs. For the latter thrust, focusing on data analytics, we look into the notion of transportation energy vulnerability, and we are using quantitative metrics to define transportation energy burdens, how these vary per socioeconomic and demographic categories, and how adaptive capacity and the availability of alternative modes, such as public transit and active transportation, can help curb the effects of increased fuel and electricity costs. We are also looking into the policy making and how this compares to equity goals. We are investigating, using empirical data, California vehicle rebate projects, funding allocation with respect to electric vehicle rebates, in order to assess how interventions such as income caps can help more lower income populations adopt and use electric vehicles. This research is very much aligned with the fact that transportation has the highest reliance on fossil fuels of any sector, and our research works towards targeting this issue and tackling this challenge. Addressing also the climate crisis and mitigating the significant risks that are posed by climate change to all our human and natural systems requires drastic reduction of transportation emissions, as well as its harmful pollution. Massive shifts to clean vehicle technologies, including battery electric, hydrogen, and sustainable liquid fuels for all the light, medium, heavy-duty sectors, are crucial strategies for transport decarbonization, but they're not a panacea. We also need travelers' attitude changes toward active transportation and electric public transit use. We need investments in order to make safe infrastructure and efficient management systems for public transit and active transportation. We need clean electricity and effective travel demand management in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, while also have health and energy efficiency co-benefits. A major engineering challenge is planning and implementing the transport decarbonization transition with objectives that differ from the ones that we have in the past. We need to address disproportionate energy and air quality burdens that disadvantaged communities experience and make sure that we distribute the benefits in a more equitable manner. As the transportation infrastructure system and communities are threatened by worsening and more frequent climate impacts, such as hurricanes, wildfires, extreme floodings, engineers and our graduates take up the challenge to build resilient by design sustainable transportation systems and fortify the infrastructure that powers them. We know that transition to electrified light-duty vehicles has real benefits that are not only tied to emissions reduction that depend on the marginal electricity generation and emission rates of the region, but there are also economic benefits. In the state of Illinois, there are significant opportunities for reducing carbon dioxide emissions when we're shifting from a gasoline vehicle to an electric one. This can amount to decrease of the pounds of emissions by approximately 82%. Even though in the early stages of the market, electric vehicle market deployment, we have higher capital costs than purchasing gasoline vehicle counterparts, there are significant economic savings that can be accrued over a vehicle's lifetime. These come from increased electric vehicle efficiencies, lower charging electricity costs that can lead to 50% fuel cost reduction on average and 30% lower maintenance cost on an annual basis. These signal opportunities for consumers and for prospective vehicle buyers beyond the altruistic satisfaction of reducing environmental pollution when owning an electric vehicle. These cost and environmental externality reduction benefits are translated to sales. And we see that the monthly sales of new plug-in electric vehicles reached 7.4% of all light-duty sales in September 2022, exceeding for the first time a 7% share. We also see that within a decade, we have more than 140,000 of electric vehicle public charging ports available. The majority of those are level 2, but there is a growth of the direct current fast charging network on the interstates, supporting long distance trips and frequent long distance drivers. To tackle the challenge of planning an electric vehicle charging network, as researchers, we use empirical data from revealed electric vehicle early adopters' preferences on charging locations. More specifically, we looked into data from a California Energy Commission survey that shows that 88% of the battery electric vehicle drivers had charging sessions at home, which is not surprising given low electricity rates and charging costs, as well as the convenience of several hours of overnight vehicle dwell time. 24% of early adopters have charged at work premises, when only 17% mentioned charging at least once at a public charging location, where charging sessions are much faster, but costs are higher. This means that we can imagine a future where home charging is a ubiquitous solution. However, we need to implement technological and management practices so that residents of different housing types can have guaranteed access to charging infrastructure. We know that residents of apartment complexes who are prospective electric vehicle owners confront major obstacles associated with home charging infrastructure installation and access. Only 1/3 of multi-unit dwellers have access to garages where charging infrastructure installation can be performed. Cost burden, renters' rights, and ineffective shared charging management may hinder multi-unit dwellers' charger deployment and ease of use. This can lead to limited access to reliable charging infrastructure, which could hinder electric vehicle adoption for this portion of the consumer market. My group, funded by the Department of Energy Vehicle Technologies Office, introduced the concept of community charging hubs in multi-unit dwellings. We envision that multi-unit dwelling parking lots will host a limited number of shared chargers that can have similar or different power levels, level 2 and or direct current fast charging, while the residents' charging schedules are managed centrally, accounting for their day ahead schedules and adhering to their daily schedule constraints. Such a shared charging management system can perform dynamic charging session to station location and help right-size the charging infrastructure required to support the residents' electrified travel needs, while the stations can have high utilization and return on investment. We need to examine how this system will result in different power profiles that will affect the levelized cost of charging, and we perform a techno-economic assessment using granular information on capital costs, operational costs, utility electricity rates, and energy sold, so that we can understand the trade-offs between community charging hub performance and levelized cost of charging. To solve this problem, we reimagine the job shop scheduling problem, a traditional problem in operations research that is determining the best sequence to process jobs on machines. In our case, jobs are charging sessions and machines are chargers. The charging scheduling problem determines the optimal schedule of charging sessions among multi-unit dwelling residents' electric vehicles. Our objective is to have an efficient operation of the hub and electric vehicle driver satisfaction as a whole. In order to achieve that, we are minimizing the make span, making sure that we are creating compact charging schedules to drive utilization to increase, and also minimize the total waiting time to make sure that at the system level, we have a good performance and satisfied multi-unit dwellers and electric vehicle owners. To solve this problem, we propose a charging scheduling algorithm that determines the sequence of charging sessions at each charging station based on a set of dispatching rules. And we feed a decision tree using a variety of dispatching rules. We are training the decision models to be responsive to the system's parameters based on a variety of them, as you can see over here, so that we can decide which of the dispatching policy rules are better to be implemented for its system. As you can see in the figure on the right-hand side, our proposed algorithm performs much better than a first-come, first-served unmanaged practice in a multi-unit dwelling, resulting in significant savings. Here we have an example for New York City multi-unit dwelling charging hub, where we vary the number of level 2 charging stations in the apartment complex location. We see higher benefits as we have a lower number of chargers because management can be much more effective. As we are increasing the number of chargers, we have diminishing returns from the practice, as we would expect. We are also able to derive trade-offs, levelized cost of charging versus total time of waiting for the system, so that we can provide insights to investors of this type of charging hubs. Our techno-economic assessment is responsive to different business models. We are considering trade-offs between residential ownership, utility ownership, or private company ownership of this hub. As an example, if we have a Los Angeles Homeowners Association operating a typical multi-unit dwelling charging hub with 8 level 2 chargers, the residents will incur costs of 38 cents per kilowatt hour for charging, with an average waiting time of 40 minutes per vehicle. If we increase the number of level 2 stations to 13, the levelized cost of charging increases by 13%, but the delay in charging is virtually just a few minutes per vehicle. So there is trade-offs between waiting time and cost that investors can take into account when they decide the size of the station that they are going to propose building at an apartment complex. And of course, we extend the results to be pertinent to our local region and state of Illinois. We are looking into the region of Chicago, a mega region with a big share of multi-unit dwellings. And we are able to assess for a typical multi-unit dwelling, the average multi-unit dwelling size of 19 residents and 14 vehicles, assuming universal adoption of EVs, the impacts of different charging hub magnitudes and level 2 charger sizes in total waiting time for the system. If we only host 2 chargers, the average waiting time per vehicle is 2.2 hours, but the cost can be around 15 cents per kilowatt hour. When we are building and installing in place an 8 level 2 charger hub, we can virtually have no delay, but this comes at a cost of between 21 and 30 cents per kilowatt hour, dependent on the ownership model of the charging hub. Now, we know that apart from home charging, there are workplace charging opportunities. Workplace charging is the second most preferred charging location, and we are interested in understanding opportunities that stem from electric vehicles and office building energy management to improve energy efficiencies of coupled systems. A lot of employers are working towards providing workplace charging capabilities because they know that they can mitigate travel, range anxiety of their employees, and accomplish corporate sustainability goals, as well as attract tenants and other employees in their location. We are collaborating with the Pacific Northwest National Lab in order to devise this integrated energy management workflow. We have a very granular building simulation in US climates stemming from Energy Plus, where we investigate the impact of building control strategies and interventions, such as thermostat set point adjustments and daylighting control on opportunities to save energy. This energy saved can be used in order to accommodate the new loads that are coming in the workplace from electric vehicles. These need to be responsive to the commuting patterns of the employees, and their charging demand. Not only we are able to accommodate the load of electric vehicle employees and owners, but also be responsive to time of use electricity pricing that the commercial location would be under, and manage electricity bills for the building manager. So at the end of the day, in the electric vehicle building Nexus, we can achieve both energy savings and minimize charging costs in this process with our optimization framework. An example of our insights that we gained through this process, and I will focus on the region of Chicago, is that by shifting in an office building 0.5 degrees Celsius, the thermostat during the summer, we can help saving approximately 50 kilowatt hours of energy that can be used to accommodate 7 electric vehicle charging demand daily. So there are these trade-offs that can also stem from other opportunities, dimming electric lighting to meet target illuminance levels, or further increase or decrease, dependent on the season, the Celsius decrease of the thermostat in order to accommodate more and more electric vehicles hosting capacity at the office. And through this optimization process, we can also have insights on the electric vehicle building Nexus power profiles that are very important for these building managers who need to be responsive to how their electricity bills are going to change. They are often charged demand charges, so they need to know their peak power and understand what are the opportunities to create more uniform power profiles. We are working beyond just home and workplace charging. We are looking into the value of public charging infrastructure to consumers. We know that the network of dense public chargers assists electric vehicle travelers to extend their electrified miles and to also complete their long distance trips. This is very important because it helps them cope with range anxiety. Range anxiety is the fear of exhausting a vehicle's range before reaching a public charging destination. Public chargers can also have spillover effects. This means that they encourage and build confidence in the future of electric vehicles. And this can increase consumers' willingness to own this emerging vehicle technology. We use all this research background and information in order to build a model that can help us minimize total costs of electric vehicle infrastructure while achieving a desirable emission reduction goal over a planning horizon. And we implement this optimization framework in the United States so that we can receive insights on what is possible to achieve during a 30-year time frame. Our goal is to determine the optimal level of charging infrastructure over time and rebates allocation over time. What is the most important thing is the need to account for electric vehicle and gasoline vehicle demand. And we have, in that sense, electric vehicle and prospective gasoline vehicle owners that are utility maximizers. We need to account for their perception on capital costs, operating costs, as well as network externalities. These are what we call neighborhood effects, where we have to consider the probability of choosing electric vehicles is more likely to increase as the number of EVs adopted increase in a certain region due to visibility and trust relationships. These are nonlinear concepts. These are logistic functions that are introduced in our optimization model, making it harder to solve. So we employ simulated annealing algorithms to solve this optimization framework so that we can get insights on incentive allocations in the United States. Even if we do nothing, right, that we do not invest in rebates allocation and charging stations deployment, there's still going to be 0.2 billion metric ton carbon dioxide savings, just purely driven by the market and the growth of the electric vehicle market. There's maximum opportunities to reach 0.4 billion metric tons carbon dioxide emissions reduction. We are investigating a target in the middle point, and we see that we should invest in rebates earlier charging infrastructure later as the market is growing. And the concept is that rebates are responsive to universal needs for lower capital costs of electric vehicles, while chargers would need to build a good coverage level so that users can electrify more miles and be able to save in operating costs over the life cycle of the vehicle's ownership. We also investigate sensitivity analysis, the impact of emission reduction targets. The higher the emission reduction target, the longer the rebates per vehicle, and the greater the final number of charging stations that are needed in order to help us meet them. The rebate bound that we start allocating plays a role in the number of charging stations. We see that rebate amounts that are greater than $7,000. We know that currently the tax credits that are related to the infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act, are approximately 7.5K. If we are at that bound, the number of charging stations needed will not significantly vary over time. But if the rebate upper bound is less than 7,000, then you will need more investments on charging stations to compensate for low rebate values and save more from operational savings. Home charging and oil prices are very important, and these insights on future trajectories of those two are critical in order to understand better what are the outcomes of the electrification trajectories. Beyond actually understanding how, in a temporal manner, these investments need to be allocated, we need to also do analysis at the spatial level. Where do these public chargers need to go to and be installed? There is a big effort towards coming up with charging infrastructure facility location models that are responsive to multi-stakeholders feedback, with insights related to network's economic viability, which is a very important component, as well as the needs for time-consuming electrical upgrades. These are tied to the essentially the utilities costs associated with electrical upgrades and the system that is out there currently. There's, of course, equity considerations that are multifaceted and increasingly valued by public agencies. You can see that in the state of Illinois, for our analysis, we put together a very holistic model, data-driven model that is responsive to understanding current charging inaccessibility, information on substation locations and proximity, traffic proximity, household income distribution, the particulate matter 2.5 concentration across the state, as well as information on disadvantaged communities and minority sayers for creating a well-rounded decision-making for charging infrastructure deployment and suitability. And we come up with this suitability map for the state, incorporating these economic, societal, and environmental justice indicators. We were successful in integrating feedback from charging providers, utilities, non-governmental organizations, consultants, and public agencies through creating an electric vehicle steering committee of diverse stakeholders and through an expert elicitation practice that helped us integrate and create this feedback loop between practice and research. We can think of a future where electric vehicles are important in rural environments and the need for investments in these regions. You can see kind of a snippet of NPR, one interview that I gave there for the Northern Colorado stretch, where they had a charger that was not really used by locals, but only by those that were passing by the region, accommodating the need to recharge in order to get to the destination. And you can imagine how important these stations are when we're thinking about extreme events and emergencies, such as evacuations during hurricanes. And I was fortunate to talk with a journalist from KPRC in Houston, Texas, where we discussed the importance of planners being cognizant of electric vehicle drivers' needs, while also what electric vehicles need to know and comprehend evacuation plans before evacuating when they're driving an electric vehicle. Evacuation planning is crucial when we are really aiming to achieve resilient and safe communities, particularly in the face of increasing frequency natural and anthropogenic hazards. In 2022, there were 6 hurricane and tropical storm disaster declarations in Florida. We learned major lessons from Hurricane Katrina. Evacuation route planning there led to streamlining the evacuation process and resulted in avoiding delays in reaching shelters. So we need to adapt these concepts as we're thinking electric vehicle evacuees. There are sparse charging infrastructure networks, and evacuation distances that might exceed vehicles' driving range can pose challenges to the travelers reaching successfully safe zones. So we have a major engineering challenge here to provide designated paths to electric vehicle evacuees that enable safe routing alongside access to charging infrastructure. And this is something that our group pursued. So we aim to be able to design these routes that access refueling infrastructure on the way to safety and accommodating alternative fuel vehicles needs, because we envision that during the transition, we will have both gasoline, electric, and potential other fuels in the mix. Of course, we need to also adhere to evacuation specific route characteristics. For example, seamlessness is an important component. We know that if we have one path to shelter, this can help avoid confusion between evacuees and streamline coordination and enforcement efforts. Contraflow, traffic control practices come to play in evacuations because we usually have people evacuating away from hazard, right, heading to safety, not a lot of people traveling from safety to hazard. So we can reverse road links direction and increase directional capacity and networks better utilization. We have an evacuation routing model that is responsive to this need. Our objective is to minimize the total system travel time and refueling time, subject to seamlessness, contraflow, refueling needs, and flow conservation. And the solution methodology is based on a path-based decomposition with branch and price with column generation procedure as our algorithmic process. We are able through this process to solve large-scale evacuation problems. You can see here the South Florida network from Homestead to Miami to West Palm Beach and Jupiter, all the coast that might be frequently hit by hurricanes, and evacuees in these areas experience frequent preemptive evacuations. So we apply our model to this large-scale network, and we are able to gain insights, design the routes that are responsive to evacuation needs of gasoline vehicle users in a case where we have this fuel type as a universal use in the network. We observe that by employing our practical model, we are able to gain information on what happens when we have shares of gasoline vehicle and electric vehicle drivers. Of course, this leads in an increase in the total evacuation time, not only because electric vehicle drivers need to reroute from shortest paths because they need to access infrastructure, but because we also have to account for their recharging time, which is of course a time-consuming process. So all this information is necessary for evacuation coordinators, emergency managers, so that they can be responsive in advance to these electric vehicle traveler needs and avoid exposing them to hazards and being left without enough range to complete their evacuation process and reach safety. Beyond just routing and be responsive to designating evacuation routes for electric vehicles, we need to think how refueling stations can help support evacuations in the setting. So we are proposing strategically placing alternative refueling stations to reduce alternative fuel vehicles vulnerability and help emergency planners manage these fuel logistics. We propose a location model where we deploy supplementary alternative refueling stations according to the evacuate demand. This is on top of the existing, let's say, charging infrastructure network. And we also solve a routing problem where we design the evacuation route with the consideration of the new locations. And we employ a modified network topology to identify refueling activities, because not only we need to track how refueling station nodes may be visited by certain vehicle, but they can be not only for refueling, but also as a midpoint along the evacuation route. The modeling framework is an optimization one. We have path-based location routing problem. The objective is to minimize the deployment cost of emergency stations and the evacuation time. So this is a joint objective. This is subject to budget for deployment, flow conservation, spanning trees or seamlessness considerations of the evacuation paths, contraflow control, and refueling constraints needs. And we solve the location problem through a vendors-inspired decomposition or routing problem, similarly to the approach that I described previously with our Branson Price with column generation procedure. We employed the algorithm, the solution procedure to the South Florida evacuation network. We're able to gain very interesting insights on how we need to deploy emergency portable charging station locations for evacuations. You can see that in preemptive evacuation planning, gasoline vehicles do not require additional stations given their driving range. But medium-range electric vehicles would require the addition of 7 portable stations in nodes in the network. This refers to locations, not necessarily ports, because we might need more ports than just 7 stations to accommodate the demand in an effective manner. And long-range electric vehicles would require 5 portable stations to cover the demand within the evacuation process. Of course, these results might differ as the shares of electric vehicles increase. This particular example suggests greater shares of gasoline vehicles than electric vehicles in the case. But as we are having greater and greater share of electric vehicles, we would be more capable to optimize evacuation routes based on their needs. And thus, this might lead to even needing less emergency portable stations during that time. Another consideration when it comes to electric vehicles is that climate change is driving an increase in the advent of power outage events. But we are fortunate that the new generation of electric vehicles is equipped with what we call bidirectional energy exchange capabilities. These are vehicle-to-household technologies that provide opportunities for electric vehicles to serve as battery energy storage resources and have backup power that they can serve some household electricity demand during these outages. Such bidirectional connectivity can be important when we are thinking about potential health hazards caused by overheating or cold temperatures during these outage events. We are performing large-scale simulations for 9 climate regions across the US for all the different seasons. And we're seeing that in the South US climate region, electric vehicles like a Ford F-150 with a 50% state of charge can cover the residential energy needs during a 12-hour power outage. Of course, it is important to consider trade-offs between covering home energy needs, residential energy use, and mobility capabilities, and we are investigating that in our analysis. We know that vehicle-to-home connectivity can be coupled with residential energy modulation in order to ensure that this battery resource can be a viable solution against short-term power outages during cold stresses and extreme heat events. I think that it's important to highlight that electric vehicles are 2 to 3 times more energy efficient than gas-powered counterparts. But overall, the greenhouse gas reduction benefits depend on the carbon intensity of the electricity generation mix. So It is vital for utilities and charging network providers to enable households and commercial customers to use renewable energy for their electric vehicle electricity needs. We are able to create algorithms that promote charging at times that assist with integrating more renewable sources on the grid. Time of use and dynamic electricity tariffs can incentivize clean energy use, and smart charging management can help better align charging timing with renewable sources availability. So we can devise charging management plans that are not only responsive to lowering electricity bills, but are also responsive to lowering marginal emission considerations from charging. If we are able to couple electric vehicle charging with solar arrays and battery energy storage resources, we can mitigate high costs from demand charges, particularly when these are done in public or workplace stations. And we can use electricity that is generated from photovoltaic systems. You can think of applications of resilient community microgrids that can be important in areas that are prone to extreme events and ensure the service of critical loads during these power outages. With that, I would like to conclude by emphasizing the importance of working towards performing research towards sustainable, resilient, equitable transportation systems. There's a lot of technological and societal challenges that are relevant with planning such systems and would need to be effectively solved within the next decades. So we know that engineers are at the center of this transition. Our graduates will be responsible for developing these technologies, strategies, infrastructure that will serve and respect real community needs and be adaptive to the very real risks posed by climate change. There is a need for considering system interdependencies in the process. So knowing how to model coupled transportation power and communication networks comes at play. And of course, optimizing the decarbonization portfolio of technologies in such complex socio-technical systems when policies can drive a lot of different outcomes. At the end of the day, it's also important to not forget about the societal challenges, and in particular, the importance of quantifying equitable accessibility and infrastructure performance and integrating that in our modeling in a way that we can measure the benefits across different groups. I would like to thank you for your attention. Here you can see more information regarding my email and phone. And thank you to our funders, the National Sun Foundation, Department of Energy, the Illinois Department of Transportation, Illinois Center for Transportation, and the Office of Naval Research that has supported research endeavors that I highlighted.
Well, excellent, Dr. Kontou. Got a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you want me to read them out loud or if everybody can see them on the screen. First one came from Dana. Have you and your group performed any research pertaining to heavy-duty vehicles or only light-duty?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we are currently working towards heavy-duty vehicles electrification from the perspective of infrastructure management. We are looking into two different issues. First of all, making sure that we understand how charging infrastructure stations performance will change because of the operation of heavy-duty vehicles, and also doing similar analysis at the depots. And then the latter portion is tied to management, because fleets are generate a lot of opportunities for centralized management and control. So it is a very well suitable system for having a lot of efficiency gains as we are thinking about charging scheduling. We are looking into different fleets, actually, from delivery fleets in the medium duty vehicle space to school buses, electric school buses, and public transit, so that we can understand, based on current schedules, how can we optimize charging management practices responsive to particularly electricity bills in this space.
Okay. Next question I see here. Have you and your group performed any research pertaining to tailpipe reduction methods, or is your focus more on EV?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our analysis that I highlighted here, let me point to the slide. So the analysis responsive to carbon dioxide emissions reduction was comparative between electric vehicles and gasoline ones. So over time, of course, we expect improvement of the efficiency of gasoline vehicles as well. So we take that into consideration. We account for the market adoption curves in the process, and we are able to see what benefits can be accrued, reducing environmental externalities through this process over time. We have additional studies that also centered on more granular temporal management of electric vehicle charging and benefits there compared to using gasoline vehicles, but this is in an ongoing stage.
Ed Meyer just posted a question. What is your view of the use of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles?
That's a good question. There is a lot of research investments funneled towards understanding hydrogen technologies. And one of the applications, of course, is transportation. I think at the moment, light-duty vehicles, hydrogen vehicles might be difficult to see within the next decades, given the extensive network of pipelines that we need to have in place so that we can facilitate the refueling processes there. But it might be a promising technology for freight when we are thinking about long haul. And of course, a good decarbonization practice, part of the decarbonization portfolio, hydrogen in the mix. So I think that we are not going to see light-duty hydrogen fuel cell vehicles really happening anytime soon, but we're going to see investments in research that can facilitate the growth in the next decades.
I had a question that just came to mind. I've seen some studies or some pilot projects for, I believe it's inductive lane charging.
Doug, I cannot hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. I've seen some research or some prototype projects for, I believe it's called inductive lane charging. Mm-hmm. You have any comments or on that topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is an emerging technology, and I believe that there is a lot of ongoing research on the technology itself, right? I can see from a system perspective, because I do research on the system level. I can say that it is very promising, and in particular, if it can be implemented in stretches of interstates, for example, where vehicles do not necessarily need to stop, but they can recharge en route. However, I can also see a lot of operational issues related to the deployment in federal roads, in interstates, how this would happen with public and private partnerships could be a barrier that we would need to tackle, as well as payments. So actually the implementation process might be quite cumbersome. But there is a lot of interesting research in this space, definitely opportunities to reduce charging downtimes, and hopefully we will see much more information on the parameters of such systems that we can implement in our models, and understand better what is the role of this technology in the decarbonization process of the transportation sector.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any final questions they want to post? Oh, here we go. Question from Pete. I'm assuming IDOT would need to add charging stations to their routes. Are there other impacts you see needed to IDOT's system?
Yeah, definitely. The state of Illinois, and actually every single state in the US, is coming up with their programs toward facilitating the deployment of fast charging stations alongside their alternative fuel corridors, electric vehicle corridors, that's what they call them, with support from federal government. I can see the importance of, again, public-private partnerships in this endeavor, as well as the importance of engaging communities and local stakeholders in this process. And I think that we anticipate a lot of growth in this market in general, from workforce development opportunities to educational opportunities to overall some economic impacts for that can be regionally realized, but also I think that these stations can also help grow the electric vehicle market in the state of Illinois. There are very ambitious goals in terms of electric vehicle adoption in the state, and this implementation of infrastructure can help meet them, along with, of course, other initiatives that are part of the federal government and the state, and some regional incentives as well.
Interesting. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to thank Professor Kontou for putting this together. This was very informative. And I'd like to thank the department for facilitating this event with the Alumni Association. And I wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.